Hey there, and welcome to the Agentic Voice Podcast. In today's episode, we are discussing singer agency and self advocacy. My name is Kristen Ruiz, and I'm here with my co host, Dr. Geneva Main. And we also have a featured guest today. Her name is Olithea Anglin. And let me tell you a little bit about Olithea. She's fresh from her MoMA residency and Carnegie Hall debut with the world-renowned Burnt Sugar Orchestra Chamber. And Miss Olithea is a native New Yorker that has been singing since the age of 3. And by the age of 18 years old, she has performed at every major concert hall in New York City. She attended the Hart School and received her BFA in musical theater. Olithea is grateful for the opportunity she has had to perform in various theater productions all over the country. After the passing of her father, Olithea changed gears and decided to start writing her own music. She's come out with 2 EPs, Long Day's Journey and To Be Seen and Heard. Since those releases, Olithea has deepened her practice in meditation and experimental music. With the use of vocal loops, effects, and sound bowls, she channels spirit that calms the heart and eases the mind. In 2022, she released The Cosmic Church, a live meditation EP. In 2023, Olithea has also received some new honors. She was named the 2023-24 Jazz Fellow at Brooklyn Conservatory of Music. She also is a 2023 Art Oh My Music Residency recipient. Miss Olithea also is a voice teacher, and in 2020, she started her own private studio, The Vocal Journey. And Olithea finds true delight training singers in evidence-based techniques for a lifetime of healthy singing. So, Olithea, we are so excited to have you here.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. I sound very fancy when you
You are fancy.
when you read that. I was like, wow, I've done a lot of things.
Yes, you have. You're definitely fancy, super accomplished. We're so glad to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Amazing, amazing. We're excited for our conversation with Olithea today, but don't forget to follow and subscribe to our channels on Instagram, YouTube, and your favorite podcast platform. And let us know what you'd love to hear more about as we plan this next season.
So for our first segment, we'll move into what's new and what's good, where we kind of just talk about what's going great in our personal or professional lives. Usually I'll start and I'll just say I'm coming off of a high, having just come back from the Fall Voice Conference in Washington, D.C., which is great. It's always like information overload and like socialization overload. So I get to connect with some really cool people. But what was awesome for me was the very first session on Thursday morning was a session on trauma-informed voice care.
Fabulous.
It was Navigating Trauma at the Highest Level of Care, presented by Gwen Merrick, Allison Reynolds, and Wynn Vastine. And would you believe I got a shout out?
Yes, you did.
And I didn't even
Yes.
expect it, you know? It's so funny because like when you hear your name, you're like, what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to get up and wave and like, you know? But it was a nice little
Take your bow.
plug. So that was really cool. So that was a nice experience. Grateful to have done it. Glad to be back in my routine. So yeah, what's new and what's good with you, Olithea?
What's new and what's good? I recently had surgery and I feel really good. The body is such an amazing miracle of an instrument that, it with rest and a calm nervous system, you can really like feel really, really good. So my mom was always saying, every 24 hours you'll feel better. And that was absolutely right. Every 24 hours, I feel so much better. And I am just looking forward. It feels like a rebirth of sorts that I'm going through, and I'm really enjoying it, enjoying sleeping, enjoying being taken care of, which is like
Nice.
so
Yes.
nice. I don't always get that. I'm always like a mover and a shaker, and to just sit in one place and have people be like, I'll get this for you. You don't have to do this. You don't have to bend down and pick things up and all those stuff. Like, it's I've been told I'm the princess of my house right now. So so I will continue your your majesty.
I love that. That's great that you get
Can
that
you share
support.
what your name means?
Oh yes, my name means Olithea means most high queen of all. So
What?
I'm really living in my truth.
I mean, you couldn't tell me nothing if I had that name.
Okay. Exactly. You are absolutely right.
What about you, Kristen? What's new? What's good?
Well, I'm looking forward. The week after next, beginning of November, I'm going to be heading to California for a week, doing a conference out there. So I'm excited to learn more, grow. I love to be around ideas, and it's the California coast. So coming from the cold East Coast, I'm kind of excited to head over there. And then I'm actually extending my stay a little bit. I have two brothers, and so they're joining me out there. So while I'm in the conference working, they're going to be playing. But then after, we're going to stay for a couple extra days and go explore like Big Sur and some of that. So we're going to do a siblings trip, which we haven't done since before the shutdown. And I always find it they're a blast. My 14-year-old self is always shocked at how much I enjoy my brothers now. But I will say that we're all professionals in our own right. But when we get together, all of a sudden we're like 10, 12, and 15 again. So anyway, but I'm excited to spend some time with my bros exploring California.
Oh, that's so
Yeah,
sweet.
yeah.
That's
It's fun.
awesome.
Yeah, that's great.
So let's head into our next segment. Olithea, tell us a little bit about your work as a professional singer and a teaching artist, and how you see the role of voice in your life, in the world, small questions like that.
So small. I can spend this whole time talking about it, but I will say I think that I it's hard for me to separate Olithea as a person and my voice. I feel like we are one and the same, especially over the past few years. I feel like we have this really lovely symbiotic relationship, which is like as much as I pour into my voice, I feel like my voice pours back into me.
Mm.
So so that's why I feel like there is no separation. So, even if I never made money singing with my voice again, I know that I will still have her and she still has me. Um, and I think that's what I bring into my professional life as a singer. I do a lot of different singing, which I feel very blessed to be able to, whether it is I am hired for gigs. So I, do different pieces that I've been given, whether I'm at a restaurant singing a set or anything like that. If I'm doing a sound meditation, which I don't really think of it as a performance, more as a facilitation since I'm holding space and using sound, I think, as a medium or as a channel for other people to find peace and understanding and, take that moment from the universe, like, all the things that we have going on to allow to give people that moment of peace, and restoration. I really hold very close to me. And I think as a teaching artist, I absolutely, I've gained so much love for teaching. I'm so grateful for it because I felt there was a point when performing felt very suffocating, or I just I didn't understand how I was going to perform for the rest of my life. I felt like I wanted to do something more. Like I felt like performing was one thing and you could touch people that way, but then to also give people the tools to perform in their own right, whatever it is, also feels very fulfilling. So it's at a point now where I do believe in being a teacher and also an artist. I think that I saw growing up in my early career, I saw a lot of artists who were teachers because they stopped doing art and they became teachers. And I thought that I would always have to choose. And if I was a teacher, that means that I wasn't creating art at the same time. And I think that it's working with you, Kristen, and also seeing other women that I have been so blessed to be around that are like, incredible in their fields and also teaching, that I'm like, oh no, it's one and the same. It's like, as you grow as a teacher, you also grow as an artist. And as you grow as an artist, you grow as a teacher. So it's like this thing that's ever growing and changing. So I don't feel stale in one or the other. I feel like it's something that I can give to the people that I'm around, that I am blessed to teach, and, allow them to know that they have so much power in their hands, in their voices, in their minds.
I'm so glad you said that because, I hate to even utter these words, but people always have this like nasty saying, those who can, you know,
Yes.
they do, and those who can't, they teach.
Yes.
And that never resonated with me. I think it's true. The more you practice something, the more you're able to explain it, especially
Mhm.
when you have to, you start thinking about how to explain it. And the more you teach it, the more you say to yourself, okay, this is how I need to adjust for myself in the work. I love the way you explain it much more fluently than I did, but
That I remember hearing that growing up a lot too. It's just like, well, I'm not doing this anymore. So I just went to teaching, kind of like it was like a throwaway
Mhm.
second
Right.
thing. And unfortunately, there are teachers that treat it as though, treat it as such, where they, I guess, were artists, and then that part might have shifted, and they take that shifted energy and bring it into teaching. And then here you are with like people who are hungry to learn, and like, energy. I believe in the energy of it. So it's like, that, so I'm learning that I can foster that. It is important for me as an artist, as a person, to foster both. I can't leave. I feel like I'm at a point where I don't want to leave any one of them behind.
Yeah, and the truth that I've experienced in like lots of different areas of life, not just singing, is that sometimes the most gifted or the most talented or the people who get it the easiest, sometimes they're the worst teachers. They don't know how they got
Mm,
there.
right.
And then when they encounter a problem for themselves, they don't know how to problem solve.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Whereas if you've had a little bit of struggle both ways, teaching and learning,
Yeah.
you're just better at both.
I have to also give props to my mother, who was uh was a teacher for a long time, loves to learn. She's always in a course, and also has her PhD. So I watched her go through that process, which was incredible and insane. But her whole thing, I think that she was always like, if you wanna be a performer, then you have to be in a class for it. Like, she didn't believe in like just going out and winging it. She was like, no, you must learn from someone. That was like her big thing, which I always keep with me.
As you're talking, Olithea, you remind me of some articles I read years ago. It was research on teaching artists, and there's a lot of different thoughts on it. But one of the thoughts is this idea that teaching artists actually hold both energies. There's a creative side that must be expressed. What
Mm,
is the artist side? And then there is the teacher side, which is that which you own, you must share. And
yes.
so, and that if either one of those is diminished, you're not being creative, you're not expressing, or you're not sharing and connecting, that
Yep.
there's something in the well being that feels diminished.
Hmm.
So, for those who own and are kind of wired for that teaching artistry, we have to nourish both sides. And as you're saying that, you're also reminding me of a phrase that I love that I've used on here before of, free voices, free voices.
Ooh, yes.
I know. It's just
That's so good.
it's the good work of voice is to
Hmm.
free
Hmm.
voices, as we find our own liberation in the process.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about, some of your earlier training experiences? Were they all so holistic and uplifting?
Yeah.
Yeah, what was your experience like?
I think that my first experiences training, I think there was things that were really beautiful and things that I hold close to me still because I think that I think God was watching and with me. My ancestors were with me in the process. So there were points that were very difficult. But once again, I think I was dealing with teachers who weren't nurturing another side of them. So a lot of times they came in with their own preconceived notions of how they were perceived and their art was perceived in the world. And when you're telling like a budding 21, 22-year old, who doesn't know very much about anything, but is just excited that they can only do one thing and that they can only be one thing, that's really hard to hold on to. And it's very unfortunate that a lot of times that's how a lot of I went to conservatory, but a lot of conservatory training can be. I think that, or I'm hoping, I don't know, that things have changed since then, but it wasn't always holistic, unfortunately. I think I gained some holistic. I think I was like, hmm, you know what? I think it was gigging with other musicians that provided some sort of a look into what I could be. I think it was one of the first collaborators that I had, Janice Lowe, was one of my first gigs outside of college. And she is a Black woman composer, an amazing singer, songwriter, like poet, everything. And I saw that she was gigging and doing all of these different gigs. And, she wasn't in one thing. And I think I came from musical theater conservatory, which, it's kind of like Broadway or regional or like, well, good, then I guess now you teach because you failed. And she showed me that like this degree that I have can be honed into so many different aspects and so many different ways that I could do this and make a full life for myself. And I think it was important for me to see her do that and that she's constantly doing that and constantly changing. I do free jazz gigs with her every once in a while, and I'm just like, wow, I'm so grateful that I was able to meet her and like still continue to work with her and watch her grow because it allowed me to see growth within myself.
Yeah. When you're in a setting where it's kind of like there's a boundedness to what you're expected to produce in terms of sound output, or
Mhm.
even, musical theater also, there's some pressure in terms of, what your cast type is, and all of
Right.
that stuff. Um, how did that affect your sense of well-being, your vocal health? What did that look like?
Oh, it was hard. I think I left school kind of hitting the ground running. I went to every audition known to man as well. I was serving. I was like really living the early 20s New York life, like serve at night, but you're at auditions during the day. And I think at that point, like typecasting was so rigorous and it was, I don't know if it was rigorous. I would say I was definitely in a box. I am a Black woman who, and a lot of those shows, they expect a lot of things like a voice type from a Black woman, where it's like, well, if you don't sound like Audra McDonald, then you must be screaming, the level of like belt so high and so much power. It's like, I remember once I went to an audition for Hairspray, and the whole panel was just, a group of white people, as it normally is in a lot of auditions. And, I came in and they were like, so are you going to take us to church today? And I was like, I'm not sure what you mean by that. I knew exactly what they meant. It's like, am I going to, raise the high heavens and do a bunch of, twists and turns? And it was that kind of thing. And I think what it did to the vocal production, what I was producing was very strained and tight.
Mhm.
I also, my self-confidence felt terrible because I wasn't booking any of those gigs. And I was like, I just don't think my voice does that. I don't think that's what she likes to do. I don't think it's something that feels good, but I felt like I had no choice because these were the jobs that I was being put out for. It wasn't the things that friends, my white girlfriends were able to go in for that were more of ingenue and sweet. And, there was just more range of character. It didn't feel like I was getting that opportunity, which was really, really hard to deal with.
And
Yeah.
even that type of typecasting is dangerous for your white peers, colleagues as well, right?
Right.
But then it's such a more narrow lane
Hmm.
for black women or people of color. Like this
Yeah.
is what you're going to be. You're going to be the loud and
Hmm.
exciting
Right.
support.
Right. And I
Hmm.
think that's a lot of, I mean, to then do that on Broadway, 8 shows a week. I mean, that's a lot of wear and tear on the instrument, especially the way I was singing then. Like I was like, I didn't know how I would be able to keep any of that up. And at that point I knew a lot of people that were having vocal injuries but didn't want to talk about it. It was still very taboo. And that was also like another thing to come by. It's like, well, I'm working really hard, but it's not producing anything. What's wrong?
Well, I think there's a level of just natural diversity and humanity that we in the arts should be, and I don't use the word should very often, but here I'm gonna lay it down. I feel like we should be curious about
Mm,
the humanity and the individual voices and what that person has to say and how their voice says it.
right,
That's more interesting than can you essentially make this widget, sound, make this
right,
sound product. No, I
right.
want to hear you and what you're about and how you see this material.
And I think that I working on new works was where I was able to kind of be an architect of like, how I could maneuver and shape the character, shape the sound. I wasn't afraid to be like, can we take the key down? It doesn't feel very good, because you're working with people that are like, I'm shaping this based off of you versus like you're trying to fit in a show where it's like, you're a swing, so you got to do it exactly how it is done. There is no room for, doing
Mm-hmm.
something different. And I still find joy in a lot of new work when I'm asked to do so. I don't really do a lot of musical theater that much anymore, but yeah, I 1000%. Mhm.
Yeah. When did things start shifting for you? Like, was it a vocal health issue? Was it just deciding that you're going to look for your own projects? What shifted?
I think it was a level of fed up withness that I had where, I was just so tired of the audition grind. And I felt like I didn't see any payoff for what I was doing or how it was working. It just felt like I was on a hamster wheel. So I spoke to a few of my friends and I'm like, I'm just unhappy with these auditions, going in like, multiple auditions and just hearing thank you and not seeing like no one was calling me back. And I felt like for I don't think it was a vocal health thing yet. I think it was my artist health that I was more concerned about at
Hmm.
that point. That it's like I want to create, but I don't want to have to wait to be cast, to be booked to create. I want to create now. I don't want my creativity to be, I want it to be in control of my creativity. I want it to be in my creative path and my artistry. And I felt like leaving it to, you know, casting or a director or anything, just
Gatekeepers. Yeah.
yes, it didn't sit well with me.
Hmm.
So that's when I decided that I was gonna start taking a step back. And in 2012, I lost my dad. And I remember being like, I think it's now or never. I'm gonna just start writing my own music. I think it was just a level of sadness that made me decide to take a chance on myself. Something about being uncomfortable that really brings back, reminds you of where you are and who you are, and that you can always find your way back to yourself.
So what do you think? Because I know you've had to do some, you know, auditions recently, right? To gain the recognitions that you've recently gotten. So what do you think brought you from that place before where you felt like auditioning was such a grind to slaying this audition?
You know what? I think it's the audition process is very different now
Okay.
than the one that I'm doing. So a lot of it is just grant writing and
Mhm.
grant work. So they're asking for samples, and it's my own music. So it's like I'm not going in with my rep book with my 1632 bar, sometimes 8 bar cut, where you're just like screaming at them for 8 measures, and you're like, this is it. It's like with a lot of the things that I've been able to do now, when you're writing a grant, it's like I'm painting a full picture. They're getting a full idea, of who I am, and then I can put in my own samples of work that I have worked on that is weird and experimental and moody, and it doesn't have a genre. It's I call it experimental soul. So it's like
I love that. We
so
should
when
create a hashtag
I know,
experimental
right?
soul.
You're
That's
absolutely right. So it's like when I'm working in that way, I feel more confident because it's me.
Well, and that's kind of what the thought I had in my mind as you were speaking. Like, because every time I interact with you, Alithia, it's like you're just bursting with joy and like authenticity and peace. And I'm like, this person is in a good place, you know? And I really, as I was listening to your story, your journey, I'm like, that's the difference. The difference is she is being her authentic self versus trying to fit into a role. Like, pick me for this role, you know?
Right.
I think that's
Yeah.
amazing.
There was one experience that we had that I think is imprinted on my brain. Olivia and I we were working together right before you went on to sing on the Carnegie stage hall on Carnegie's stage, and you said, "I feel ready. I trust myself." And
Mhm.
the way you said that, I got a chill, and I was like, "Go into the world, be you."
I mean, I saw, like, when Facebook has their memories, a memory came up yesterday that when I first put up my first looping video. So I do a lot of vocal effects, vocal looping. And I remember seeing that video, and like I was on a smaller machine, and it was like brand spanking new, and it was 7 years ago. And I was like, wow, like I constructed this new practice for myself 7 years ago because I was like, I'm going to, once I'd been performing for a while and I was in a band, I was like, but I want to perform more. And I don't always want to perform with other people. How can I do this? And that's when I got into looping. So it's always like a pivot, you know, uh, a new change, something else. It's like a level of like, I don't really like the way this is working right now. I feel like I can find something better. And that's what, shifts and, gets to the new place. So that trust myself, it was well earned. I knew at that point I felt very good.
So cool. I love the way you art.
She's also being very humble because in her looping process, she's um innovated new ways to do it that other people are now reaching out to learn from her
So
It
on
is
cool.
this
very true.
other way of approaching that part of the art form. So we're talking about a high creative here. Yeah, absolutely. What would you say to maybe some singers who are trying to find their voice, who are trying to find that ground where they can say, I trust myself, and they're just not there yet? How do you find your voice when everybody else's voice around, especially in the world of voice, is so loud?
Oh my
There's so
God.
much obligation. There's so much, like you brought in like um you know expectation that sometimes is like, where did you even come up with that? Like,
Right.
so how do they find their voice? What worked for you, or what thoughts do you have on that?
My newest thought as I am preparing to work on and create new music is this is probably my boldest thought yet, where I'm like, I don't think I care what what other people think is cool or trendy, because I don't think people know, right? Like it's cool and trendy when that person believes in their thing so much, so wholeheartedly, that they do it regardless of what other people would think. And then that becomes the trend, right? And when that happens, all of a sudden, it's like the new interesting thing.
Mhm.
And I think I think it's also taking the pressure off. I think I had to take the pressure off of myself. Like I'm supposed to be this at this point at this time, you know. And I think that you have to allow yourself to grow, allow yourself to make bad stuff, allow yourself to really experiment. You know, if you're trying to, I think a lot of times people are using other people's formulas for their own experiments. And and then it fails and you wonder why, or it sounds the same. And I think you have to allow yourself to just make a mess and enjoy the mess and take from there what you can gather. But I think it's, you know, you have to start cultivating that little voice.
Mhm.
And the little voice then gets louder and a little stronger. And then you just be like, you know what? I think I'm just going to make things that make me happy and write lyrics that maybe only I understand, but that but then there will be people that will resonate with. It'll always happen that way. You know, it's just like I start listening to other songs that I've loved and I'm like, I don't even know what it meant to them, but what I know what it means to me in this moment and how it's touched my heart and my spirit, you know, and that's what people latch on to is, I guess, Geneva, you're saying like the authenticity of it. I think it's, you know, you just have to start cultivating that authenticity, that portion of yourself.
And as you're speaking, that level of being unbothered, that level of I don't really care what other people think, it's really hard for performers,
Yes.
hard for artists. But, when I think back on all the literature I've read about trauma and recovery, what I hear you describing is surrender. And that's
Mm,
the very thing that is what gives you peace.
yes.
So like I can literally feel the peace coming off of you, and I'm like, this woman is at peace, and it's like that is it. It's this
Yes.
unbothered, I don't really
Yes.
care, I'm doing me, I surrender. I'm
I
putting it out
surrender.
there, and whatever is the result is the result. I love
Absolutely.
that.
Yeah.
And it's the app is it takes a lot of courage to do that, to not be afraid,
Yeah.
and to just, put it out there.
There's
At this
a
point.
phrase that I heard not too long ago. I wish I could remember where it was, but the idea is, what's the difference between talent and genius? And talent is hitting targets that are hard for other people to hit, and
Mm,
genius is hitting targets that nobody else knew was there.
yes.
And so, as you're talking about creativity and following your inner voice and delighting that inner artist, there's an element of genius in this, because it then elicits things that nobody else knew to aim for.
Right.
Right.
Where
Trusting
intuition
it.
and skill, whatever that special intersection is, that's
Mm,
what that is.
intuition and skill, absolutely. I feel like I'm in
Mhm.
that crossroads,
That's
Yeah.
beautiful.
you know?
Man, that's like something, something new for me to work on. Like, something that I always work on, but sometimes I forget, this
Yeah.
daily practice of like surrender and gratitude and just not being given over to fear of what other people think. It's
Right.
awesome.
And I think when you say like intuition and skill, it's like I think that I feel like I'm at a level where my intuition and my skill are at the same level.
Hmm.
which is, it's like they're feeding each other, you know.
That's delightful.
Now they're like working together, because it's like I've had it where my intuition has always been very strong and my skill level strong, but it's like my intuition kind of would beat it out to some degree. But now my intuition and skill have been, they've been both nurtured so well that they are working in tandem.
Yeah.
I
When you
love
talk
that.
about building your skill, what does that look like for you?
I think that building my skill, there are many skill sets that I have worked on
Mhm,
for the past, I want to say, uh, maybe like 7 to 10 years.
mhm,
Whether it has been in vocal analog production
mhm,
using analog equipment, it's voice lessons that I take extremely seriously. And then I think it's also uh, doing a lot of reading and writing, you know, and
When you mean writing, do you mean like journaling
I
or?
do a lot of journaling. I do a lot of
Mhm,
journaling. I read a lot of different, I don't know if it's like self-help, but a
mhm.
lot of books in terms of like Bell Hooks and Teresa Hershey and,
Things
all of
that
these
nourish
people.
you. Hmm.
Yeah, I think that that's also a skill, is knowing like I need nourishment at this moment in time, like, artistic nourishment. Um and that's definitely what I've been working on, those skills.
So I guess we need to move on, although I feel like I could talk to you forever. But we've talked about so many good agenter practicing practices. The last of which was journaling and gratitude and things of that nature. So the last segment is agenter practice, where we ask our guests to kind of share what they think is a really good practice for themselves or for other people to gain vocal freedom, agency in their life. What do you suggest?
Well, I would say advocating for your voice. Kristen, you always say, as your voice's lawyer, which I love. Like, where it's just like you can't be the judge, the jury, you can't be all of Law and Order. But like, as your voice's lawyer, like, this is what your voice needs. And I think that that advocacy makes a huge difference. And knowing that what you need is incredibly important. For example, I said I recently had surgery. So I was nervous about being put under, as you, like, you're asleep. You don't know what's happening. You're praying, I just want to wake up, a lot of times.
Good
But
prayer.
Ray, you're just like, please let me wake up. Um, so I remember, and Kristen, we had pedagogy class, and you were talking about, intubation injuries that could happen. It's a tube that has to go through the glottis, right? That space in between. And that, like, if the anesthesiologist isn't super careful, you can just get a little nick or anything like that could cause an issue in the vocal folds. So I always kept that in mind in the back of my head, like, years ago. And I was like, well, whenever I'm having surgery, I gotta make sure that I am aware. So as I was preparing for this surgery, I was now starting to talk to my primary care physician, and I was talking to the surgeon, and I was like, I am a high performance singer. I want to know, I want to really discuss about being intubated. I even talked about, like, are there other intubation techniques that could be used? Like, but
Mhm.
when it was the day of the surgery, I spoke to the anesthesiologist, and she was super kind, super understanding. I was very nervous because you don't know if you're going to get somebody that's like, what do you know? I'm the doctor here. And she was really understanding. And she was also a Black woman, which I think is important, like that agency, and it's like seeing yourself even in the medical field, which is so tricky nowadays. And I spoke to her and I said, I am a singer and I'm really nervous about intubation injuries. And she was like, they're very rare now, but I could understand why you'd be nervous about that. I said, so here's what we'll do. I can use a smaller breathing tube for you when we're taking you under and just being really, cognizant of your vocal folds. And she did. And I know that a lot of times I've heard that people get very hoarse after surgery, and I didn't lose my voice at all. And I'm so grateful to her, but I'm also grateful to you, Kristen, because I think it's like, you were my voice's advocate before I could be at certain points. So it allowed me to have a lot of power in what I ask for in a lot of different circumstances, because the voice a lot of times comes first.
And honestly, if you don't speak up for it, then you're just driven by anxiety.
It's true. It's true. And I've seen that in a lot of my singers, like when they're performing, it's like being very clear and open of what you need. You need time to warm up. You need a sound check. You need to be very clear about, the sound.
If you were
East
in the city.
Parkway.
Yes.
You need to be very clear about the sound in the space so you can hear yourself, and if you can't hear yourself, don't say yes because you're nervous about the sound person. Say no, like I remember earlier when I would do gigs and I was so nervous about being on stage, and I would have a sound check, and I didn't know what to ask for. I didn't know who, like it went by so fast and I was like, I don't even know what I did. Like, I didn't know that I could literally take my time. Like that time is for you. You can ask for it, you can get it. And I think that that really made a world of difference, because I would watch more seasoned singers be like, can we stop actually? Can I get more highs in my microphone? Can you bring down the lows? Can I get a touch of reverb? There were things that I was like, oh, I didn't know I can even ask for those things. I didn't know that that was, and even like they're even in their stage banter, I saw a lot of power when they would hold the microphone. It's like, can y'all hear me okay? It's like, give it up for the sound guy in the back. It's like, yeah, we love. It's like, do you mind turning it up for me? It's like I just saw them as like, like magicians, like masters of not only their instrument but the space. And I found that to be so beneficial. So when I speak to my singers and they're like, I have this show, but I don't know how I'm going to do it. I'm like, listen, make sure that that day, you take time for yourself, right? So get yourself together, and then you take time to warm up. Like build in your warm up time, whether it is, 20 minutes, half an hour, just to check in with your voice. And then when you come in and you're talking to your sound person, be very clear and concise about what you need, and ask all the questions. It doesn't matter if they think that you're silly or anything. What matters to you is that you get the best product.
I was about to ask you, like, so what is how do people react to you? Like, do you get people thinking, oh, she's such a diva, she's so high strung?
I mean, probably, but I I think that
Embrace the diva.
I think that you know what? I think that it's I think please and thank you go a long way,
How you ask, yeah.
and asking people's names and calling them by their names, and being like looking directly in their face and not being afraid to hold eye contact and just be like, thank you so much, Jim, for doing this for my sound. Could I ask you for this in the monitor? And I'm also dealing with a lot of equipment as well. So it's not even just a microphone. I'm also dealing with a lot of analog equipment. So I have to be even more precise, I think, sometimes. And I think that a lot of sound people, they like that when you're just like really like, I would love this in the monitor in this wedge. Can you just like turn me up just a little bit? And so it's like, I think if you understand a little bit of what they do on a normal basis,
Mhm.
as well as what you do, that really goes a long way versus like, you're kind of just kind of flailing, which I've been, absolutely.
The two things that I'm hearing as you're talking about self advocacy, and singer agency, the two themes I'm hearing underneath is a strong sense of identity. Like
Mhm.
you've said, I am a high performance singer. I need this. That comes from a strong sense of identity. And then the other thing is that relationship with your voice. Like I like to say sometimes, and Olithea, we've talked about this. If your voice took you to couples counseling, what
Yes.
would she report? Would she say, I'm being neglected, I'm being pushed aside, I'm being overworked? Or would she say, oh my gosh, Olithea's taking care of me. She's making
Right.
sure I get what I need. If I need
Mhm.
some rest, she's like giving me the pillow. Like if I need some vibration, like what would she say? So what I'm hearing as part of this idea of how do we advocate for ourselves is building our sense of identity. Because I know some singers who even though they're working professionally still have that imposter syndrome to the point where they don't even want to say that they're singers. Like
Boss.
they feel like they're either bragging or that they haven't earned the right to say that yet. So
Mhm.
nurturing and nourishing that identity, and then having that good relationship where it's kind of like what you said at the very beginning. If I give her love, giving my voice love, she's going to give me love back. And
1000%.
yeah, yeah, beautiful.
This was awesome. This was such a great conversation. We are so grateful, Alithea, for your just authenticity and willingness to share your story. We're so grateful that you had the time to come by. Thank you so much.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me. And um, I'm just really happy to be here. I love the podcast. I am a listener. So
Awesome.
so
Awesome.
I love that your both of your perspectives, especially on voice, which is definitely comes from a more holistic way to think about it. Because I think a lot of times when we think about the voice, we think of it separate from our bodies,
Mhm.
separate from our spirit, separate from our soul. And, you know, I think it takes a lot to really be like, no, it is actually part of me. It's entwined. It's in my actual like thread of my life. And that's incredibly important. So thank you for your all of your work.
Very cool. So, in this episode, we discussed singer agency and self advocacy with Olithea Anglin. If you enjoyed today's content, please don't forget to like and subscribe and follow to the Agentic Voice podcast on your favorite podcast platform. We would also appreciate a positive review if you had the time to do so. Your engagement helps our podcast grow. Until next time, take care.